Okay. Uh, so far, I have this possibility of asking the dice pair to tell me what is the minimum sum of the two dice, and uh, what is the maximum sum, the maximum sum. And of course, this derives from the get side count, assuming that you could even have a possibility of constructing die 1 and die 2 with different values for the sums, for the amount of sides that the die is configured to. All right, so we have this in place. This is kind of hard-coded. That's okay. Now, finally, in my main application, I can say that integer integer actually not here, rather I say roller roll series, something like that. And I can pass a count how many times. Well, perhaps I want to roll 20 times. Let's try that. Right? So my dice roller right here, just drag and drop to this side. So I want to support the roll series. So perhaps this is another operation. Public void roll series. And what this thing does is that I want to be able to roll, and so I can be getting combination of 2, 7, 6, 12, 11, then 11 again, and then 7, 7, 2 again, 5, 6 again, and so forth. And this is happening like 20 times or something, right? And right here, I need to say integer series length or something like that, right? So that I get the idea how many times they want to roll, right? So when this happens, most likely I will be doing this in a loop, right? So integer index equals 0. In actually, I can probably do it in a very simple loop. While series length, basically a roll, right? And then store the result in, how about this? Store stats. Store stats, how about that? So that's the point. Now this is what I would like to do. Well, first of all, in my dice pair, I need to have at least a method that would allow me to roll. Public int a roll. And again, I might try something like this. A return. Of course, I need to basically say return essentially die 1, a roll plus die 2, a roll. Right, so that might be a possibility here. So of course I need to implement the roll method inside the die. So let me do that. Public int um, a roll. Return 1. I don't know, another terrible hard coding, right? So, but it should allow me to compile everything, hopefully. So I have the die can be rolled, and the die can tell me how many sides it has. So I have those hard codings. So in my situation, I will always roll 1. That's kind of silly. But you know what? Let's do the maximum number. Let's just return get site count so that we kind of reduce the amount of hard coding a little bit. So assume that when we roll our dice, we always get the maximum number, like 6 all the time. So which makes doesn't make sense, but we can say for debugging. This is debugging. Okay, so now back to the main application. We can say roll series. The series are going to roll. So this time, what we can do is that the dice roller, of course, must have a dice pair, right? So we say dice pair inside the roller. It should have a private dice pair, right? Something like that. And of course, its constructor, dice roller constructor, I will say constructors. Dice pair constructor, which should be public, will simply say pair, create new pair. Something like that. Right? So that should make sense. Now, once I have my pair of dice, I can say pair roll, make this call, and I can store, the result, or I can call it a sum, right? The total of the 2 dice. Then store stats. I want to basically go and say, I would like to remember what sums were produced. And someplace here, at the end, I can just say minus series length, right? So that I modify the value here. And so I continue my loop, and at some point, I will exit series length. Let's say as long as it's not 0, right? As long as it's not 0, let's do this loop. We pass the length of the series into the roll call, and then eventually we'll decrement, and it's going to be reduced by 1 each time we iterate, and eventually this condition will no longer be true. Series length will become 0. As a result of this decrement, we get out of our loop. Okay, so now the challenge is to store stats. Okay, dice pair is the class which my dice roller is going to communicate. So I'm actually moving it to the previous sequence of tabs. And so I will say uh, get the maximum possible value for the pair. In my constructor here, I can say integer max sum equals pair. Go ahead and give me this maximum sum. So, for example, if I have two dice, let me try this again. If I have two dice, and the two of them could produce values from 1 to 6, right? And from 1 to 6, then the minimum value will be 2 to 12, right? Because the maximum sum is 6 and 6, and the minimum is 1 and 1, right? So my range is 2 to 12. And this number 12 is returned by this method inside the dice pair. Because look how dice roller really doesn't care about individual die, any of them. It essentially controls everything through the interface of dice pair. So what it does, it says, okay, let me get the maximum sum. And what I can do now is to do this. I can, first of all, I can have a private integer array stats, right? Something like that. And so now I can initialize my stats as new array of integers. And I know now how many integers I need, the maximum sum. So what I'm doing here is that I'm saying that I would like to have an array of integers. In this array, I will keep my statistics, right? So I have, let me try this again. This is my dice pair. The dice pair gets created, right? It's an object like this. I draw it like a box. Then I reserve in this particular object, I essentially reserve a reference to an array. We talked about the fact that array is never created before you say new, or if you use the initializer, it will be immediately created and populated with values. So I delay creation of my array by declaring a private reference to my array, right? So stats is basically a reference to an array of integers. Because in Java, arrays are objects, and we say anytime you refer to an object, you deal with object reference. Let's save